My fiancée cheated and said I'd never find someone like her. A year later, I'm dating a model who had a crush on me since high school. So, when going around Reddit the other day, I came across this post about a guy whose girlfriend was cheating on him and didn't care. She was absolutely honest about it, as if it were no big deal. It was insane, and it made me think about my ex-girlfriend. I haven't told many people about this incident, mostly because it's long and, well, it was unpleasant at the time. But after reading that post, I thought, what the heck, I might as well give it a chance. Keep in mind that this occurred approximately 2 years ago. I met my ex, let's call her Chloe, through a dating app. It wasn't one of those applications seeking a quick hookup. It was one of the more serious ones, with people reportedly hoping for a relationship. Anyway, at the time, I was 33, and she was 30. We matched, chatted, and there was an instant connection. It's difficult to explain, but we just understood each other. We shared the same sense of humor, interests, and could talk for hours without becoming bored. It was very refreshing. After a few weeks of online and phone conversations, I eventually invited her out on an actual date. I was a little nervous, to be honest, because she was so lovely. I mean, breathtakingly stunning. I am not suggesting I am a troll or anything. I think I'm a decent-looking guy, but she was clearly in a different league. I remember thinking at the time that I probably wouldn't be looking for anything serious with her, because, you know, girls like that usually have a lot of options. I did not want to have my heart broken. Being with someone who is overly attractive is a strange problem, I know, but it can provide its own set of challenges. Anyway, she agreed to the date, and we had a great time. It just validated everything I felt during our internet conversations. We started seeing each other more frequently after that, and it became formal very quickly. One thing that was continually on my mind was how much attention she received from other men. She would tell me about it occasionally, even when we were together. A guy would shamelessly hit on her in front of me, or she'd receive messages from guys via social media. At first, I wasn't concerned by it. I trusted her. I got the impression that she wasn't interested in anyone else and was truly interested in me. Stupid? I know. But that's how I felt at the moment. I was simply enjoying being with her, and I didn't want to be the jealous, insecure lover. Things were going great, really great, except for one tiny item that kept lingering in my mind. We were having one of those crazy late-night chats where you speak about random things, and the subject of hall passes came up. If you're not familiar with the term, it refers to a hypothetical situation in which you and your partner each got to choose one celebrity with whom you would be allowed to sleep. No questions asked. It's meant to be a jest, a bit of fun, but it can occasionally expose some underlying sentiments. Anyway, she brought it up, which struck me as weird. Usually, I'm the one who initiates such silly chats. She said her hall pass was Justin Timberlake, which is fair enough. He's a nice-looking guy. But then, she said something that really resonated with me. She added, I don't think there are many celebrities who would say no to me, with a slight smirk, as if she was entirely serious. Now, I knew she was beautiful. I had always known that. But hearing her say it in that way simply rubbed me wrong. She seemed to be accepting that she could have pretty much any guy she wanted, which made me uneasy. It seemed out of character for her, too. Despite her outward appearance, she had always been quite approachable. It just felt arrogant. It made me feel uneasy. I said nothing at the moment. I just laughed it off and we went on to the next issue. But the comment persisted in the back of my mind. I kept thinking about it throughout the next few days. The feeling vanished, and things returned to normal, but I never forgot about it. The shift in her behavior. Things were going really well for a while after the hall pass chat, but then I noticed a shift in her behavior. It was faint at first, but as time passed, it grew increasingly clear. She began arriving home later than usual. Normally, she'd arrive home from work about 6 p.m., but she began arriving at 7 p.m., maybe 07:30, or even later. And what were the arguments she gave? They were basically lame excuses. She'd say things like, "Oh, I just lost track of time," or "I ran into a friend and we chatted for a bit." It was strange, because she used to be so thorough about her day. If she was late due to work, she'd tell me everything: what project she was working on, who she spoke with, and so on. Now, it was simply these vague, meaningless reasons. On top of that, she became quite irritable. If I inquired why she was late, she would snap at me. She'd become defensive, claiming I was being overly controlling or that I didn't trust her. I didn't want to fight, so I usually backed away. I am not a confrontational person, especially when someone is already in a foul attitude. However, the late nights persisted, as did the nebulous reasons. My suspicion began to deepen. It was like a small voice in the back of my head saying, "Something's not right here." I tried to ignore it, but it became increasingly difficult. Confrontations and denials. Finally, I asked her if there was anything wrong. I said, "Is everything okay? You seem different lately?" She denied it, of course. She responded, "No, everything's fine. I'm just stressed with work." The usual. I wanted to believe her. One actually did. A few days passed, and the same things happened. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I informed her again that her behavior was unusual and that I was concerned. This time, she appeared to understand what I was saying. In reality, she apologized, claiming that it was all due to stress and exhaustion and insisting that it was nothing personal. I got what she was saying, but I couldn't get myself to believe it. The fake explanations after that chat, things appeared to improve, at least on the surface. She was more receptive and conversational. When she got home late, she'd tell me stories about what she'd been doing, but they simply felt hollow. There was something about the way she told them, the lack of information, the avoidance of eye contact, that didn't feel right. I remember one particular night. She arrived home late and told me a story about running into an old coworker and having drinks with him. And I knew she was lying. It was like a light bulb went out in my head. I can't describe it, but I received the overpowering impression that she was hiding something, something really important. And that's when the thought occurred to me: she was having an affair. It wasn't just a minor issue or misunderstanding. This was a full-blown affair. I knew I couldn't simply let it go. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I needed to discover the truth, one way or another. Her conduct had shifted dramatically from the woman I first met. It was impossible to ignore. This was not the person I had fell for before. Something was clearly wrong, and I was determined to find out what it was. The plan. Okay, I'm sitting there, convinced that my girlfriend is cheating on me. My initial thought was, I need to check her phone. I mean, that's where all the proof should be, right? Text messages, emails, social media, everything. But I quickly knew it wouldn't work. First and foremost, she was always on her phone, making it very impossible to take it away long enough to conduct a thorough search. Even if I did comprehend it, I'm not exactly a tech expert. I wouldn't know where or what to look for. And she'd probably removed anything damning anyhow. Plus, the first needed proof. I didn't want to locate a questionable text message and then confront her with it. I wanted to catch her in the act, to know without a doubt. So I decided to take a different way. Hire a private investigator. Yeah, I understand. It seems like something out of a film, but I was desperate. I needed the truth, and I wanted someone who knew what they were doing to guide me to it. I wanted to know who this guy was and where they were meeting. I conducted a Google search for private investigators in my area and discovered one with positive reviews. I contacted them up and scheduled a meeting. I remember being quite scared when I walked into their office. It seemed like I was accepting defeat. I sat down with the investigator, a guy who appeared to have seen it all before, and told him everything. I recounted the entire event, from the hallway conversation to the late nights and lame explanations. It took a while, but he just listened calmly and nodded. He made no judgments about me. He did not make me feel foolish. He was just listening. Then he stated he'd seen this type of thing 100 times before. He preferred to do surveillance for 2 weeks because her late nights were variable. But this would be somewhat costly. We ultimately agreed on 10 days. I gave him all of her contact information, including her phone number, email address, and where she worked. Before I departed, he told me not to contact him until the 10 days were up, unless it was an emergency. It'll be difficult, he told me. But you need to let me do my job. I agreed. I knew it would be torment, but I had to believe him. The longest 10 days of my life. These 10 days were among the longest of my life. It was awful to know that this investigator was following my fiancée and could unearth proof that confirmed my darkest concerns. I felt helpless, just waiting, wondering, and thinking all kinds of possibilities. It was difficult to focus on anything else. Work was a nightmare. I could not sleep. I barely ate. And the worst part? Throughout the 10 days, she consistently arrived home late. 3 times. She arrived home after 9 p.m., using the same tired, pathetic justifications. Oh, I had last-minute plans with some friends. Traffic was terrible. She had no idea that every time she said those things, it further confirmed my suspicions that she was lying. Each time she was late, I thought, okay, this is it. This is when the investigator will catch her. It simply offered him more opportunities to get the evidence I required. The truth comes out. Finally, the 10-day period ended. The investigator phoned me precisely on time. He didn't say much over the phone, just that he had the information I needed, and asked if we could meet in person. I answered, yes, absolutely. This was something I needed to hear face to face. I couldn't bear hearing this kind of news over the phone. I had been waiting for what seemed like an eternity, and I needed to see his expression to know for certain that what he was telling me was true. I drove to his office, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I felt terrible to my stomach. When I stepped in, he was sitting with a manila envelope on the desk in front of him. He motioned for me to sit down. Then he asked if I wanted him to simply explain what he discovered, or if I wanted to examine the contents of the package myself. I said I wanted to hear it from him first. I thought it would soften the blow a little. In my brain, I compared it to walking in on your partner cheating and having a moment to brace yourself before the gut punch. He took a big breath and replied, "Your suspicions were correct. Just like that. There's no avoiding the issue. There's no sugar-coating it." He informed me that he had followed her to an apartment building 3 times. She went in alone and left about 2 hours later, always with the same man. He had obtained the apartment number and the individual's name, Cody. Obviously, I'm changing the name. To be honest, my initial thought was that I wanted to find this Cody person, and let's just say I was not thinking peacefully. But then I realized this wasn't the point. The point was that my girlfriend, the lady I adored, had deceived me. That's what I needed to concentrate on. The investigator slid the envelope across the desk. I opened it. And there they were. Pictures. Photos of her and this Cody guy in front of the apartment building. Embracing, holding hands, kissing in front of her car. Everything was there in black and white. Unquestionable proof. I almost lost my mind. I almost broke down right there in his office. It was one thing to suspect something, to have a gut instinct, but seeing it with my own eyes was a very different experience. The visual evidence was very overwhelming. I managed to keep back tears, although it was difficult. It wasn't just the affair. It was the realization that my entire life, the future I had planned with her, was falling in front of me. The confrontation, I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. I was about to confront her. When I arrived home, I asked her to sit down. I did not yell. I didn't create a scene. I said quietly, "We need to talk." She was aware that something was off. She saw it on my face. She sat down, and I simply lay everything out. I informed her I knew about the affair. I told her I'd hired a private investigator. I informed her that I had proof. Her first emotion was shock. She simply stared at me, her mouth slightly wide. Then she attempted to calm down, to act as if nothing had happened. But I wouldn't have it. I told her what the investigator told me about the residential building, about Cody, everything. And she simply sat there silent. She did not refute it. She did not apologize. She did not even attempt to explain. She just sat there listening. The more I talked, the angrier I became. Her silence was infuriating. She didn't seem to care or to be sorry for what she'd done. Finally, I could not take it any longer. I told her I wanted to break up. I responded, "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep playing this song and dance. I'm done." And then, she did something very unexpected. She laughed. She stepped up as if to frighten me and began this full monologue. "You want to leave me?" she inquired. "Are you kidding?" "So what?" I had a little bit of excitement on the side. "It was just physical. It didn't mean anything. I'm a cheater." "Fair. But where do you think you'll go from here? Do you think you'll ever get someone like me again? Hasn't it been clear to you over the years that I'm out of your league? It was one time. Is that what you want to destroy our lives over?" She spoke a lot more in that vein, essentially attempting to make me feel lucky, that I should simply be grateful to be with her, even if she cheated. Can you believe it? I was stunned. I knew she was arrogant. I knew she thought well of herself. However, this was a whole new level. This was not a sincere apology. This was hardly the reaction of someone who had been caught and wanted to make amends. This was the response of someone who didn't give a damn. Someone having a genuine F-it attitude, a true crash-out mentality. It seemed as if her ideal scenario was for me to simply accept that she was too good for me, that she would do whatever she pleased, and that I should be content to be along for the trip. She honestly believed I wouldn't have the courage to leave. That's how proud she was of herself. Her comments struck me like a ton of bricks. I'd felt wounded and outraged before, but this was different. This was pure fury. I'd never felt anything like it. I stood up, looked her directly in the eyes, and told her how much I detested her. I don't remember the precise words, but they were along those lines. And then I walked out. I didn't bring a bag. I did not say farewell. I simply stepped out the door. I couldn't bear to be in the same room as her for another second. I felt completely betrayed. It was over. The aftermath, I ended up staying the night in a cheap motel. I couldn't return to the house. Not yet. I just needed to be alone and contemplate all that had transpired. I laid there in that uncomfortable bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the confrontation in my mind, over and over. I couldn't believe the way she reacted. It was simply unbelievable. The next day, I returned to the house to get some of my belongings. I assumed she would be at work, but she was present. She appeared to have been crying, but she was attempting to play tough, as if nothing was wrong. And then, get this. She had the nerve to reply, "I knew you'd be back," with a smug little grin on her face, as if I had just thrown a small tantrum and crawled back to her. I didn't say anything. I just went inside and grabbed some clothes, toiletries, and other necessities. I knew I couldn't acquire everything at once, but all I wanted was to get out of there as soon as possible. I replied, "I'll be back for the rest of my stuff later." She just stood there staring at me, her face filled with disbelief. as if she couldn't believe I was leaving. She said nothing till I was walking out the door. Then she merely whispered something under her breath, which I didn't catch. And frankly, I didn't mind. I've been trying to understand why she acted the way she did. I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around it. Perhaps she was looking for validation or excitement outside of our relationship. Perhaps she was insecure about becoming older or about our routine. Perhaps she regarded me as a safe, dependable, cuddly husband, but also as someone who she considered beneath her. And perhaps because she had always felt that way, she did not consider the infidelity to be a huge problem. She'd already rationalized it in her mind. Of course, all of this is just me guessing, attempting to make sense of something that does not make sense. The aftermath. After I departed, she began contacting me. The first few messages were mocking and caustic, as if she thought the whole thing was a joke and that I would just run back to her. She definitely believed I was lying, that I would not go through with leaving. But, a few days later, I returned to the house with a friend to retrieve the remainder of my possessions. And she was shocked. She could not believe I was being serious. I believe it was the moment she realized it was truly over. One of her final texts to me read, "I hope you know you'll never find anyone like me again." Seriously? I blocked her after that. I couldn't take it anymore. It was simply too much. Moving on. Okay, let's skip ahead a bit. The whole breakup with Chloe was a shambles, and it took me a bit to get my bearings. But life continues, right? A few months later, I had my 15-year high school reunion. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go, but a number of my friends persuaded me. It ended up being a great time. It was nice to see all the old faces and meet up with people I hadn't seen in years. Just a really upbeat, enjoyable vibe. And then there was Veronica. Enter Veronica. Veronica attended my high school class. She was a tall, stunningly beautiful girl. We were cordial and took some classes together, but we were not particularly close. She was one of those girls who was just naturally cool, you know? After high school, she became a model, and a rather successful one at that. I had seen her in some magazines and internet advertisements. If you're into fashion, you may recognize her name. I hadn't spoken to her in at least 7 years, possibly more. So I'm at the reunion, having a nice time, when I realize that Veronica isn't present. However, her best friend from high school was. They were still really close, which I thought was fantastic. It demonstrated that Veronica had not changed much, despite her success. I went over to see her friend just to say hello and catch up. We were talking, and she kept a wide smile on her face the entire time. When I named Veronica, her smile grew even wider. She made a face and continued. "I know she's going to kill me for telling you this, but you know she's always had a crush on you?" I just chuckled. I mean, come on. Veronica, a successful model, have a crush on me? It appeared utterly ludicrous. Even in high school, we didn't run in the same circles. We were friendly, but not more. There was no way. Also, becoming a model now? There's no chance. It was flattering, of course, to think that someone like her would find me beautiful. But I assumed that was just a high school event that she'd long forgotten about. I told her buddy that I didn't think. Veronica remembered me, but she insisted. She explained that Veronica had requested her to check me out at the reunion to see if I still looked as nice as I did in high school. And then she continued. "She's still into you. So if you're single and you're not scared of girls with baggage, you might as well give it a shot." I spent the remainder of the night reflecting on the talk. It was all so unexpected. I won't lie, it felt wonderful to know that someone like Veronica was interested in me, especially after what had occurred with Chloe. It felt as if here was this woman who my ex would have deemed out of my league, and she was allegedly crushing on me. It made me understand how useless Chloe's remarks were. and how much she wanted to bring me down. It provided a significant confidence boost. Taking a chance following the reconnection, I decided to take a chance. I figured, what could I lose? I decided to contact Veronica online, as the kids say. I found her on Instagram and messaged her. I also informed Veronica's friend that I was going to message her in case she did not check her direct messages from people she did not follow. I did not want my message to be lost in the mix. And then I waited and waited and waited. I waited 5 days and heard nothing. I'd completely forgotten about it, to be honest. I believed she was probably busy or that her buddy had exaggerated things. I wasn't too concerned about it. But ultimately, she replied, and her message was quite enthusiastic. She wrote, "Oh my gosh, Keith. It's been so long. Now I've heard that the more letters a woman repeats in her text to you, the more she likes you. I'm not sure if it is accurate, but it felt like a good sign." We began messaging back and forth, catching up on pretty much everything. We spoke about high school, about what we have been up to since then, about our jobs, our families, everything. After a few days, Veronica recommended we switch to FaceTime. She claimed she was tired of typing so much. I was delighted, of course, and we began making video chats virtually every day. A deeper connection. During those video talks, I began to understand more about her life as a model. She told me everything about the industry, the travel, the photo shoots, the ups and downs. She was in Brussels at the time, working on a campaign, and even gave me some photos from the set. That was fascinating, and it was awesome to watch her in her environment. It also allowed us to connect on a deeper level, while being thousands of miles apart. After a few weeks of almost daily communication, it began to seem like we were dating. We hadn't formally called it that, but it seemed like more than simply friendship. So, I decided to be a little corny and simply ask her, "What are we?" She chuckled and said we were really wonderful friends, but she wanted to be more. I saw this as a cue to ask her if she wanted to be my girlfriend. She quickly agreed, with no hesitation. It was a wonderful feeling. The long-distance challenge. Obviously, the long-distance aspect was challenging. She was a model, traveling the world while I was here doing my regular work. One had a long-distance relationship when I was younger, and I despised it. It was difficult to maintain that connection, to feel like you were truly a part of each other's lives. But this was different. This was Veronica, and she was already so important to me that I was willing to go to any length to make it work. So I booked a flight to Brussels to see her. She was going to be there for a few weeks working on a project, so I decided it was the perfect time to see her and get a taste of her culture. The trip that changed everything. The trip was just stunning. Brussels was beautiful, of course, but being there with Veronica was incredible. It seemed like a dream come true. It taught me that I shouldn't give up on love because of a single negative experience, that there were still excellent people out there, people worth the effort. She even brought me to one of her photo shoots. I got to watch her work, see her in her element, cheer her on from the sidelines, and take some of my own photos. It was so great to watch her doing what she loved, and it made me feel even more connected to her, as if I were truly a part of her life. The Instagram mishap. So I was in Brussels, having the time of my life with Veronica. I took a lot of photos during the photo shoot and decided to share a few of them on Instagram. I didn't upload them to my main feed though. Instead, I shared them on my close friends' story, expecting just a limited group of individuals to view them. Here's the thing. I completely forgot about my ex, Chloe, who was still on my close friends list. I rarely use Instagram, so I didn't think to block her there. I had blocked her everywhere else, but not Instagram. A big mistake. I received a message from her just a few hours after posting the photos. Remember, we hadn't spoken in almost a year by this point. The message stated, "Who's that? Why are you playing groupie?" A laughing emoji appears next. I quietly responded, "That's my girlfriend." I said nothing else. She did not respond right away. I could see the little typing sign emerge and disappear several times over the following 10 minutes, as if she was writing something, deleting it, and then writing something new. Finally, she only sent a snarky message. Sure. The final goodbye. That's when I decided to try it. I informed her that she didn't have to trust me. Then I said, if you thought you were out of my league, then Veronica is out of this world. I also questioned her. How's your man from back then doing? I knew it would sting. She read the message, but did not respond. And then I blocked her on Instagram. I realize it was probably petty of me to say those things. But really? I believed she earned it. And I did not want her to have any further access to my life. Any more opportunities to get under my skin? Even yet, I'll admit that I was curious about her reaction. I'll admit it. Happy ever after? And that, my friends, concludes the story. It's been an exciting voyage, to say the least. But I can honestly tell that I am happier than I have ever been. Veronica and I have been dating happily ever since our vacation to Brussels. And I won't lie, I'm thinking about proposing before the end of the year. Don't tell her, however. Veronica is a true blessing in my life. She is kind. She's funny. She is intelligent. She's stunning, both inside and out. And she makes me feel like the luckiest man in the world. I am really relieved that things did not work out with Chloe, because if they had, I would not have met Veronica. I understand that some people may criticize me, could respond, oh, he's just with her because she's a model. Thus, long distance never works. But I don't care. I refuse to let anyone's criticism spoil my relationship with Veronica. She is great, and I'm quite thrilled. If things don't work out, you may come back here and tell me I told you so. But God knows, I don't see me penning another piece here. So, that's it. That is my story. It's a story of treachery, heartbreak, and eventually finding love and happiness in the most unexpected places. Thank you for listening. Reading, I suppose. I opened my marriage, lost my husband, and now I'm fighting to win him back. Is it too late? I'm here to seek guidance on how to save my remaining marriage. Let me begin by stating that I have been with my spouse for 7 years, and we have been married for 5 of those years. I'll call us Skylar and James, for privacy's sake. In our second year of community college, we got to know one another. James went on to receive a 4-year degree in business administration from a university that provides remote programs at the community college, while I obtained a 2-year degree in office management. In the present, James is 27, and I am 26, and we intended to have a child later this year. Having 4 children, ideally 2 boys and 2 girls, was our desire. Both of our families loved us, and we had a really happy marriage. This is where I made a big error. I formed a relationship with a delivery driver for one of the 3 major delivery companies, which some could refer to as a work-husband relationship. To keep things private, I'll call him Jaden. Jaden has been delivering to my office for about 2 years, at the age of 25 and unmarried. Unquestionably, we clicked right away. It wasn't romantic, but there was a spark that pulled me to him. Every time he made a delivery, we would converse for at least 10 minutes. I started to look forward to seeing him, and always made sure to be honest with him when he showed up. Our chat went farther than normal one day. Jaden said he wanted to ask me a personal question. He said he didn't want to offend me or endanger our business relationship because it was so personal. I encouraged him to ask and reassured him that was okay. I feel a very strong attraction to you and wondered if you felt it too, he admitted at that point. His audacity shocked and embarrassed me. After giving it some thought, I confess that I felt it as well. Jaden continued by saying that if I weren't married, he would have asked me out. The conversation ended when I thanked him for the compliment. That was the last of him. Our conversations grew awkward and short throughout the course of the following week. I was so ashamed that I thought I had gone too far. Even as James and I continued to enjoy our married lives at home, the guilt persisted. To be clear, I have always been totally happy with James as a husband, friend, and lover. I thought he would have said the same of me at the time. For me, he was ideal. Nevertheless, I mistakenly started to dream about having both my devoted husband and a relationship with Jaden that went beyond business chats. Later, I discovered that this is frequently called eating cake. Intrigued, I began reading up on open marriages and polyamory. I initially thought the concept was nasty and ridiculous. I was certain James would not consent. And even if he did, I wanted to prevent our marriage from being harmed and our family from becoming estranged. Weeks went by, and my married life was still great. But there were still thoughts of Jaden. I came upon a blog article by a lady in an open marriage with the heading, "It Doesn't Hurt to Ask," when I went back to the subject. She talked about how she sought a relationship with a man she met while volunteering, even though she loved her spouse. After 2 years of suppressing her emotions, she finally asked her husband on a lengthy drive. He was interested, which surprised her. 4 years later, they apparently had a stronger, happier connection after opening their marriage and finding other lovers. Because it mirrored exactly what I wanted, but was too scared to question James about. Her tale struck a chord with me. Then, one Sunday morning, I made the decision to bring up the topic as we were relaxing at home, conversing and using our phones to browse the internet. I just read this online post about open marriages. I said immediately to James, "How do you feel about them?" "Are you talking about couples sleeping with other people?" he questioned. Glancing at me, I reaffirmed and inquired about his thoughts once again. In response, James said he found it repulsive and added that if someone wanted to sleep together, they should simply seek a divorce. I said, "It's really becoming popular here in the US and other Western countries." In an attempt to diffuse the situation. But his expression made it obvious that he was disgusted by the subject, so I quickly changed the topic. His response made me decide that I would never bring it up again, since I didn't want to endanger our marriage, which I thought was fantastic. A few weeks later, James and I were snuggling in bed together, enjoying the glow from a fantastic evening. He remarked abruptly, "Who did you have in mind when you brought up open marriages last week?" As I lay on his chest, unable to see his face, I went cold. I gently lifted my head to look at him, and a pit developed in my stomach. "What are you discussing? What are you saying?" I stumbled. James clarified that he has read studies indicating that a woman's reference to an open relationship with her boyfriend frequently indicates that she has previously cheated or has another lover in mind. I was shocked by what he said. In fact, I was shaken to my very core. James remarked, "I know you too well." After realizing the effect of his comments, "Just be honest. I can tell you're hiding something." I could have stopped there, but instead I remained silent, turned my head away, and finally told him, "I have never cheated on you and would never do so. Rather, I acknowledge that there was someone at work I may think about if we ever discussed an open marriage." "Tell me about this work friend," James insisted. I reluctantly started to describe Jaden and our encounters, including the moment he revealed his emotions for me. I didn't reveal, though, that I felt the same way about it. I was frightened by James's next statement. "You know, technically, you've already cheated on me." I retaliated defensively, saying, "I haven't cheated. Your relationship with this Jaden guy is what's known as an emotional affair," James retorted. James gave me an explanation of the term, because I had never heard it before. I listened in frustration as he explained the workings of emotional affairs. James finally proposed that we end the conversation since he needed to go to bed, because he had an early start the next day. I couldn't fall asleep, but he did. Rather, the first picked up my phone and began looking up emotional affairs. What James had asserted was supported by article after article. My relationship with Jaden was more than simply an emotional one. It was a full-fledged one. I was overcome with guilt. I felt like I had let my hubby down. I went downstairs to make myself some tea because I couldn't sleep, and at around 4 in the morning, I fell asleep on the couch. James kissed me awake at 06:45 a.m. "I'm heading out for work," he declared. As usual, I kissed him back and told him I loved him, but this time, with guilt weighing heavily on my mind, I made it clearer than ever. "You should start your day. It's almost 7 a.m." After making love for a few days, we were laying in bed once more when James abruptly remarked, "If you truly want to, I'd be willing to try an open marriage." "Why are you bringing this up now?" I questioned, stunned. He clarified that he had been considering our earlier chats and reasoned that, if it was something we wanted, we should attempt it while we were still young. I pledged never to endanger our marriage or our love, but I did show cautious attention. I told him, "You are the most significant person in my life. If our love bond is strong, it will withstand infidelity," James retorted. James didn't respond when I retorted. A mutual open relationship wouldn't be considered infidelity because we'd both agree to it. "Consider our marriage open, starting right now," he remarked instead. Surprised again, I told him to calm down and that we needed to set ground rules. He made the following specifics. We had to let people know ahead of time who we would be sleeping with and when. We had to later, without going into graphic detail, tell each other about the incident. There are no exceptions to the rule that all types of closeness must be protected. I accepted his conditions and suggested a few more. We would maintain the privacy of our open marriage. We would pledge to stay together and prevent these adulterous affairs from ruining our marriage. James declared that he was unable to accept either of these terms. He refused to talk about it more and just said he didn't and wouldn't agree to them when I questioned why. I was worried since this felt totally out of character for James. I snuggled up to him in spite of my discomfort, and we dozed off. I became uncomfortable with the idea of an open relationship throughout the course of the following month because I thought James might be up to something. I chose not to pursue it and concentrated on leading a typical life. I avoided talking to Jaden at work during this time, limiting our exchanges to trivial subjects like the weather or our respective workloads. Then, one day, Jaden asked me if something was wrong and said he truly missed our discussions. I explained to him that I didn't have much time to talk because I was so busy at work and at home. I contemplated whether or not to disclose my open marriage to him. I eventually made the decision to tell him how I wish I could take that choice back. I asked Jaden to join me for a drink after work because it didn't seem acceptable to have such a chat there. He concurred. We got together at a neighborhood tavern with a terrace outside, which was ideal for the warm early spring weather. I asked him directly whether he would be interested in a relationship after telling him about my newly announced marriage. Without hesitation, he said yes. Although he respected my boundaries, Jaden acknowledged that he had been waiting for me to change his mind and that he had been dreaming about me for months. We talked flirtatiously most of the time that night. We decided to have our first romantic meeting at his flat the next day. I made it clear that I had to depart by 06:30 p.m. to go back home to James, who was still my top priority. I came home that evening and made James a delicious meal. After supper, I told him about my conversation and meeting with Jaden earlier in the day, and that we had planned to meet at his apartment the next day. Assuming James was still okay with us being married in an open marriage. Despite appearing surprised, James answered, "Oh yes." "All right, so you're meeting him tomorrow?" As my top focus was him and our relationship, I reassured him that we could still cancel if he so desired. "No," he insisted. "Let's do this." In contrast to our typical embraces, I felt hardness and remoteness in his. I blamed it on nerves. We didn't speak much that night as I concentrated on my own work, and James worked in his office. I tried to start an intimate conversation with him before we went to bed, but he stated he was too exhausted and wanted to relax. When I woke up the following morning, James had already left, leaving a text message saying that he had neglected to mention an early meeting. He also mentioned that he would see me that evening. This was not like him, but I brushed it off and went about my day as usual, dressing and going to work. I picked a really lovely clothing that day because I knew I was going out with Jaden after work. I texted James throughout the day, but he didn't reply. I contemplated calling off our date with Jaden, but I now regret not doing so. I got a text from James at 04:17 p.m. He promised to meet me that evening and wrote that he loved me. I was relieved by this, and I saw it as his approval to proceed. I'll get right to the point. When Jaden and I first met, our private moment was fierce. There was clearly no love involved, and it wasn't quite as satisfying as it is with James. But because of the unlawful nature of what we were doing and the pure passion, it was physically satisfying. After an hour and a half, I left Jaden's residence and got home shortly after 06:40 p.m. I was shocked to see that James wasn't home yet. I was relieved since it allowed me to take a shower and wash my clothes to get rid of the smell of Jaden's perfume. Despite my physical sense of fulfillment, I was overcome with regret, guilt, and shame. I felt soiled, as though I had violated every fundamental principle in my marriage. I was really anxious, and it was a mental tug of war. One made a short but beautiful meal and put candles to create a romantic atmosphere since I was determined to make it up to James. I wanted him to understand how much I loved him and that the sexual relationship with Jaden was meaningless because it was only physical and couldn't compare to the happiness and love I had with James. My hope was that we would make love at the end of the evening. James was still away from home around 07:30 p.m. When I tried to call him, the call went straight to voicemail. I texted him to let him know that dinner was ready when I got home. When I didn't hear back by 08:50 p.m., I became concerned. I kept phoning and texting him, leaving messages, but I never heard back. At last, at approximately 09:30 p.m., James texted me, saying, "Don't wait up. I will arrive home late." He didn't respond when I texted him back to inquire where he was and who he was with. I finally dozed off after midnight, emotionally and physically spent. The sound of the shower running in the guest bathroom awakened me up. When I went up to look, I saw that the door was locked, which was completely out of character for James. He did not answer when I knocked. After 10 minutes, James came out, wrapped in a towel, and said nonchalantly, "Hey, how was your night?" After I assured him that everything was okay, he asked me straight out, "Did you have sex with Jaden?" I winced at his directness and urged him to use a different wording. I reluctantly said, "Yes, Jaden and I were together." I then inquired about his whereabouts. James confessed that he had gone out dancing and spent the night at multiple pubs. Because I could smell perfume on his clothing, I was suspicious and questioned who he was with. Upon pressing, I inquired, "Who is she?" He said that he didn't have to identify her because they hadn't shared a bed. Although I was astonished by what he said, I was more offended by his tone and language. James's angry remarks caused me great concern, although he never used profanity when addressing me. I then questioned him about why he had taken a shower in the guest bathroom. He told me icily that until I had completed 2 STD tests, he would be utilizing the guest bathroom and bedroom. I was devastated by his statements. "This wasn't part of our rules," I objected. "I ensured that Jaden wore protection during all of our activities. Have you never heard of oral HPV or herpes?" James shot back, "Till you're cleared, I won't come within 6 feet of you." Think of this as my personal take on social distancing. I informed James that I wanted to end our marriage right now, since I was so distraught and crying. I cried. This is the last thing I wanted to happen. No way, James shot back. I'll have my turn now that you've taken yours. James only stated that he was going to bed since he had an early meeting and needed rest. Even though I started crying more, I sobbed on the couch for the majority of the night before dozing off. When I opened my eyes, James was gone. I tried contacting him during the day, but he didn't pick up. He texted me saying, "Don't wait up for me." I left voicemails and texted, but nobody answered. I felt like I was going crazy because I knew I had probably ruined my marriage. I didn't see Jaden at work that day, as there were no deliveries. But I gave him a call at 04:30 p.m. and inquired about our possibility of meeting that night. He acknowledged that I sounded agitated. I told him I wanted to break up with him when we first met, acknowledging that it was a big mistake. I admitted that I just wanted my husband because I loved him. He understood, and all he wanted for was one more connection. Other than that, he would only ever speak to me at work. I consented, and our brief and unremarkable hookup lasted less than 10 minutes and consisted just of a basic posture. Jaden later said to me, "That was awful." I apologized, acknowledging that the entire affair was a tremendous error and not his fault. "You just laid there like a tree trunk." After getting ready and giving him one last hug, I turned to depart. I asked Jaden, bewildered, what he meant when he said, "I'll never understand women like you," before I left, but he just muttered, "Nothing." No comment, with a look of utter hatred on his face. I hurried off, sobbing all the way home. How was I able to be so foolish? I had ruined my marriage for nothing at all. I felt filthy once more, and thought I was the world's most foolish person. It was one when James finally returned home that evening. I was tired of knowing that I was the only one responsible for ruining my life. James did the same thing on Friday, leaving before I woke up and texting me, "Don't wait up for me." The coldness and distance between us broke my heart. I missed our mornings, evenings, and weekends together, cooking together, going on walks after supper, and chatting about random topics. I sorely missed it when it was all gone. I sent James a text message requesting to speak with him the following morning. "All right," he said, "as long as it's first thing." I asked him where he was going, but he didn't respond. "I'm leaving for the day." It was 1:30 a.m. when he returned home. I just lay in bed and sobbed without saying anything. Without saying anything, James immediately went to bed after taking another shower in the guest bathroom. The following morning, I got up early to await his arrival. He entered the kitchen, poured himself some orange juice, and sat at the table, looking at his phone. At 7 in the morning, the atmosphere was lifeless and icy. I approached him, sat on his knee, and whispered, "Look at me." He looked away, but I gently took hold of his face and met his brown eyes. I said, "You have my undying love. I really apologize for the poor choice I made. Not a mistake, but a decision. I will stop at nothing to win back your love and trust." James remained silent, while staring at me as if I were crazy. I pleaded, "Are you still in love with me?" He said, "I'm not sure." I sobbed and begged, "I can put this right." He said, "I don't think you can." I said, in a fit of rage, "You orchestrated everything. Didn't you set me up for divorce?" James denied it, but acknowledged that based on what he had read, he realized our relationship was probably finished the moment I raised the subject of an open marriage. I questioned him. "Why didn't you just tell me to stop talking to Jaden?" I was devastated by his response. "You can't make someone be faithful. You are either monogamous or not, and it is clear that you are not." He just got up and stated he was going, despite my entreaties not to ruin our marriage. He said he would return after midnight when I questioned where he was going. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday, I told him. Our scheduled departure time is 7 a.m. Go visit the home of my parents. We spend every holiday with them because they adore you. James replied icily, I'm not going. What am I supposed to tell my parents? I begged him to come, shocked. Tell them the truth, he added with a shrug. He packed a gym bag and left the house without saying anything more, despite my repeated pleas for him to stay. I feel totally deflated and ruined inside. I would appreciate any guidance or recommendations regarding actions I can take to keep my marriage intact. I'm particularly interested in hearing from those who have had similar situations with open marriages, and whether or not a couple can move over such a betrayal. After an open relationship, have you been able to successfully reconcile? I appreciate you hearing my tale. I'm going to bed now, so I can spend the rest of the day crying. First update. I would want to express my gratitude to everyone who replied with comments and encouragement. I was able to get through the past several days because to it. Many individuals properly chastised me and called me derogatory things, but I deserve it. And I also value your opinions. Two of the worst days of my life have been Easter Sunday and today. When I pulled up to my parents' house, they asked me right away, "Where's James?" I lied to them and said he couldn't make it because of an emergency at work. I didn't want the family get-together to be disturbed. At first, my family believed my tale. But as the day wore on, they began to suspect that I wasn't phoning or texting my husband, as I usually do. I sent multiple phony texts and claimed to have responses from James, assuring everyone he was still busy at work and would give me a call tomorrow in order to allay their suspicions. To be honest, he never texted or called, not even to see whether I had made it safely. I was devastated by this. On Monday, I had intended to spend the night at my parents' house and discuss our marital issues with them. I was afraid they would be angry and despise me if I did this. I told them this morning, and everything went exactly as I had expected. They shouted at me, called me horrible names, and said that I wasn't brought up this way. When my sister was summoned over, she started to lash out at me as well. I told them I realized what I had done was horrible and sobbed. I promised them that I had grown from the experience and would never do the same thing again. I informed them that regaining James' love and trust would be my only priority going forward. Ultimately, they told me they loved me and would pray for our marriage to be saved, even if they were furious with me. On Monday night, I took a car home. I texted and called James during the day, but he didn't respond. He had gone to Florida to see his parents and would be back on Sunday, according to a note on the counter when I got home. We had arranged to go there together in early May, so I felt terrible. Now that strategy is shattered because of me. I despise myself. For now, that's all I have to say. I'm simply so unhappy and dejected. The fact that I'm no longer crying frightens me. Tears no longer seem worth shedding because of the depth of my hurt and regret. Second update. I didn't intend to publish again for almost a year, but I decided to offer an update because the community showed such a great deal of interest. I have some good news, as well as some negative news. The first piece of terrible news is that I'm divorced. Back in December, it was decided. James ultimately came to the conclusion that he couldn't stay married to me once I started seeing another man. He claimed that he was ashamed to be seen with me in public, and that he would never be able to trust me again. He claimed that he regained his masculinity after the divorce. I disagree. He never lost his manhood, and only our families are aware of my brief relationship with Jaden. Well, anything. The good news, no. The amazing news is that last month, James and I resumed our dating life. It's been great since Valentine's Day when we reconnected. Our passion level is unmatched, much higher than when we initially started dating 7 years ago. But we only see each other when he wants to, which has been around once a week. James has stated unequivocally that this is merely a physical matter, and that we will never again be a couple, get married, or live together. I'll take what I can get, but I'm not really comfortable with this. I want to get James back. I would like to have his children if I am unable to achieve that. I wouldn't baby trap him, so don't get me wrong. All I want is to have kids with him. Without getting married, I've considered how we could divide custody and still work things out. I don't want children with anybody else, even though I know it seems weird, but I love him. I understand that doing this would probably put any future relationships I might have with other men in jeopardy. But I only want James. That's all I have to say for now. And until something significant occurs, I doubt I'll post again. However, I would adore hearing your thoughts about my predicament. Do you believe that my decision to date James is insane? Is it better for me to go on and find someone else to start a family with? P.S. Jaden has never been an option. I simply made a poor choice with him, and I will never do it again. Thank you. Entitled Mom tries to force me to sell my property for her daughter's college and escalates when I refuse. I possess $34 million worth of real estate in our hometown, including a number of homes. Years of arduous labor, prudent financial decisions, and self-sacrificing actions have led to this. For background, I'm from a modest family. Both of my parents worked in blue-collar jobs and put in a lot of effort to give my siblings and I a decent upbringing. Although it was out of their price range, they had always hoped to own their own home. Their upbringing stoked my desire and strengthened my resolve to improve my family's quality of living. My wife and I were in college when we first met. Raised by a single mother who worked several jobs to make ends meet, my wife's family had similar experiences. She became aware of the importance of ingenuity and financial caution. Both of us aspired to overcome financial difficulties and provide a secure future for our kids. Over the years, my wife and I have been buying and flipping residences nonstop. We gradually accumulated a number of properties by carefully investing and saving every cent. Every property stood for years of toil, innumerable sacrifices, and a common goal between us. I am now the father of a son and a girl, two amazing children. In addition to being a source of revenue, our properties serve as a testament to our commitment to providing for our kids' futures. I had no idea that an entitled woman named Emily, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, who has been one of my tenants for a few years, would soon cause my life to take an unexpected turn. She lives in a cozy 3-bedroom home that I bought years ago, before I married my wife. After careful saving, her daughter's high school is adjacent to the property, which is situated in a desirable area of the city. After their daughter was born, Emily's husband abruptly left her, leaving her a single mother. I gave her subsidized rent to allow her to move in after learning about her situation. I wanted her and her daughter to be able to afford to live there, even though I knew I would lose out financially. The rent has stayed the same over the years, and I have never raised it. Emily had consistently paid her rent on time, making her a dependable tenant. Our relationship as landlord and tenant became informal, and we occasionally stayed in touch when she needed my assistance around the property. Her daughter was a senior in high school and getting ready to submit a college application. Emily told me 3 months ago that her daughter was admitted to a renowned out-of-state university, which is an incredible accomplishment for any high school graduate. Unfortunately, her scholarship didn't even cover 10% of her tuition at this incredibly costly university. I was concerned about how they would handle the financial challenges of higher education because I was aware of them. Emily asked to meet me one day. Without much hesitation, I accepted, assuming it had something to do with the necessary house renovations. As we sat down in the house's living room, she began by expressing her gratitude for my generosity and providing her with a large portion of the rent. She went on to tell me how much she wanted Lily, her daughter, to go to the university of her dreams. But after calculating the costs, which included accommodation, tuition, and other charges, she found that it was too much for her to manage by herself. Even after applying for financial aid, researching scholarships, and taking a part-time job in addition to her full-time employment, it was still insufficient. Perhaps she was going to ask if she could postpone paying the rent for the month, which would have made sense. So I shook my head firmly in understanding. Rather, I was flabbergasted by Emily's astounding desire for me. She requested that I sell the house where she was residing. As she went on to explain that the property I owned and had rented out to her would bring in a healthy profit, enabling her to pay for her daughter's college education. I gave her a questioning glance. "Are you serious?" With a mixture of surprise and incredulity, I replied. "You want me to sell my property to pay for your daughter's college tuition?" Emily argued that it was her one chance to ensure her daughter's future, and her eyes begged me to do so. She said she was sure the entire property could pay for her daughter's college expenses because she had already had it evaluated. Since I couldn't possibly sell my house to pay for her daughter's tuition at a prestigious university, I asked her if she had gone insane. I informed her that I had sentimental attachment to this house and that I would not be selling it for nothing. Once more, Emily persisted, claiming that I could lend her the money and that her daughter would reimburse me after graduating. I knew how important a college education was, yet I refused to give in to her ridiculous demands. It was evident from listening to her entreaties that she was committed to finding a method to support her daughter's aspirations, even if it required proposing an absurd idea to an unfamiliar person. I calmly told Emily that I couldn't just give up the property because it was a big portion of my income. I should not be responsible for her daughter's tuition. I advised her to look into more cheap possibilities or ask family members for assistance if she was unable to pay for her daughter's tuition at the institution. Emily persisted in pressing the matter in spite of my attempts to persuade her to see the obvious, claiming that I was the only person who could assist and that selling my property and giving her the money wasn't a huge concern. I asked Emily not to come to me about this ever again, and when I realized it was not working, I left the property. I asked her to consider how ridiculous her request sounded and come up with an alternative. I had hoped that she would ultimately see her error, but Emily persisted throughout the following few weeks. The situation grew more intolerable as Emily's daughter was getting closer to starting college. Emily persuaded me daily to sell my property as quickly as possible, even though I denied it. She even protested by ceasing to pay her rent, as Emily persisted in her conviction that my property would solve her financial problems. Our formerly cordial relationship deteriorated and our tension increased. She believed that my refusal endangered her daughter's future and was self-serving. However, because she was refusing to pay her rent, I was losing money. We had an unbreakable pact. So I told her that if she didn't comply, I would take the case to court. It was becoming more and more obvious that her demands were endless. When Emily began bringing other people into our argument, it was a tipping point. She spoke to her neighbors and friends, accusing me of being a callous landlord who would not assist a young girl in achieving her goals. She emphasized her position as a struggling single mother and informed them that although I was quite affluent, I would not lend her the money. Those she confided in sympathized with her story. Emily used social media to further her cause, posting on Facebook that she blamed me for her daughter's failure to go to college. Rumors soon began to spread throughout our area. People understood her predicament and believed that I could help but was purposefully refusing to. I couldn't help but feel alienated in my own neighborhood. At last, my wife made the decision to contact Emily in order to resolve the growing dispute. She thought that open communication would be a way to resolve the growing tension in the neighborhood. But Emily wasn't in the mood for a quiet conversation. She went on a rant right away, claiming that the only way she could ensure her daughter's future was for me, the landlord, to sell the house. My wife made sincere attempts to persuade Emily, but her conviction remained unwavering. She accused us of being self-centered and claimed that we had the money to pay for her daughter's college tuition. Emily persisted in pressuring my wife to comply with her requests, and the talk went on in a monotonous loop. Her message had a visible effect on the neighborhood and the local community, portraying me as a wealthy and callous landlord who would not assist a young girl in realizing her aspirations. We were viewed with suspicion by those neighbors who had previously been friends with us. They started to think that, although I was consciously refusing to do so out of selfishness, I did have the capacity to lessen her daughter's financial problems. Others who understood my background, my diligence, and the truth of my circumstances agreed with me, and were equally horrified by Emily's bold request that I pay for it. They served as a reminder to me that I had to safeguard my assets and uphold the legacy I had worked so hard to establish. Every day, the community grew further polarized, with some people feeling sorry for Emily. I remained firm in my resolve to defend my property in the face of increasing pressure. I had worked hard and made sacrifices for years to earn it, and I wasn't about to give it up easily. Emily, meantime, kept stoking the fire by accusing me of being uncaring and taking advantage of her by letting her live for free. Her statements on social media grew more outspoken as she talked about her daughter's perseverance and the innumerable sacrifices she had made in order to become ready for college. Consequently, the argument progressed from a private dispute to a public discussion. My family was beginning to feel the effects of the accusations, as a result of their peers repeating the untrue things they had seen on social media about me. My children started to be bullied at school. Seeing how distressed they were by this circumstance was awful. I made the decision that it was time to act at that point. Since Emily was affecting my children, I had remained silent, believing that she would ultimately cease. But it was time to correct the record and stand up for my morals. I contacted a lawyer that focused on tenant-landlord disputes and property disputes. In order to stop Emily's defamatory efforts and preserve my reputation in the community, we quickly wrote a cease and desist letter. According to my lawyer, the cease and desist letter was the beginning of our legal struggle, and we would go all the way to court if Emily didn't change her mind. Emily was obviously shocked to receive the letter. She tried calling me on the phone, but I declined to take her calls. Then, before things got out of hand, she texted me to say she wanted to chat and make amends. She said we could have a conversation and that it was all a big misunderstanding. I responded by saying I was going to sue her. She was going to regret ever trying to play me. So I encouraged her to enjoy it and brace herself. Emily has been adamant that I cover her daughter's tuition, damaging our family's reputation in the town and online. So I know this will be a difficult battle. My attorney is already getting ready for the case by detailing all of the unfounded charges and the damage she has done to us over the past few months. Some of my family members advised me to give her a chance to resolve the matter, as she is a single mother attempting to act in her child's best interests. After learning that I was bringing her to court. So, Reddit, am I the jerk for taking the entitled mother to court rather than selling my home to cover her daughter's college expenses? Update. Emily sent a letter of her own, containing more defamatory remarks and threats, in response to our legal action. Despite being aware of her financial circumstances, she has accused me of charging exorbitant rent, which she claims prevented her from saving money for her daughter's schooling. Her willingness to deceive and go to such lengths to achieve her goals is astounding. I've already given her subsidized rent, so it's annoying to see her play the victim when her claims are unfounded. She is obviously attempting to take advantage of the situation, and I will not allow it to occur. Emily's determination to fight to the end is apparent. Although my attorney, Matthew, has reassured me that we have a solid case because her charges are unfounded. He has advised me to be ready for a drawn-out and taxing court process. I can't help but consider how rapidly things have gotten out of hand. I had no desire to find myself in a courtroom, particularly with someone who had previously occupied my land. However, there are instances when you must defend what is rightly yours and stand your ground. Even if Emily may have good reasons, I can't let her force me to sell my property. The future of my family is on the line, and I'm committed to seeing this through to the end, no matter how difficult it gets. Update 2. The legal process has formally started since my last report. It had been agonizingly painful to wait for the court date. Tension permeated the courtroom as both sides presented their cases and supporting documentation. Emily presented herself as a struggling mother who is committed to securing her daughter's future, accompanied by her lawyer. In a detailed account of financial difficulties, her lawyer emphasized how my property had been the last straw for her daughter's aspirations to enroll in a prominent out-of-state university. Emily's emotional statement was filled with emotions as she talked about the sacrifices she had made as a single mother, including the long hours she put in at work and her unshakable dedication to her daughter's achievement. She portrayed herself as a mother who had done everything she could, talking about her tenacious job hunts and multiple applications for financial aid and scholarships. Emily's lawyer persisted in portraying me as a rich, callous landlord who put money over a young girl's aspirations during the proceedings. They suggested that I had been aware of Emily's financial difficulties, but had nevertheless taken advantage of her predicament by charging her exorbitant rent. Emily presented a family friend as a witness, claiming to have overheard a conversation between Emily and me in which I supposedly offered to sell the property to pay for her daughter's college education. This was the most shocking turn of events. When this flagrant untruth was told in court, I sat there in shock. Matthew, my lawyer, vigorously disputed this allegation, claiming that no such discussion had ever occurred. He made the deliberate decision to refute the witness's account. The family acquaintance who testified on the purported conversation was first subjected to cross-examination by Matthew. In order to determine the witness's memory's credibility, he asked a number of specific questions. In an attempt to uncover discrepancies or holes in their memory, Matthew inquired about the time, date, and place of the alleged conversation. The family friend found it difficult to respond with consistent information and was unable to provide any hard proof to back up their claim, such as emails or texts. Under examination, their testimony grew more and more dubious. Matthew provided evidence that directly refuted Emily's account, severely undermining the case's credibility. He presented documents of emails and texts that were sent back and forth between Emily and myself at the time the said agreement was allegedly made. These texts made it quite evident that she had never brought up the idea of selling the land to pay for her daughter's schooling. Rather, they proved that it was Emily who was always putting pressure on me to sell the house. Furthermore, according to testimony from a neighbor who shared a residence with Emily, Emily had been paying lower rent than any other renter in the neighborhood. To support this claim, my attorney retrieved receipts from other local tenants. Matthew continued by arguing that the neighbor's evidence and the lack of any written or electronic correspondence about the purported pledge Emily made called into question the veracity of the family friend's story. This testimony was inadmissible as hard proof. We then concentrated on demonstrating that Emily had purposefully gone to considerable measures to damage my reputation on social media, which had led to my kids being bullied. In a detailed account of Emily's communications and posts on social media, my lawyer claimed that I was a callous and uncaring landlord who did not encourage her daughter's aspirations. In order to win the community's sympathy and support, these posts were rife with emotional appeals and downright lies. We pointed out that these posts were purposefully written to present her as a struggling mother who was doing everything in her ability to ensure her daughter's future. But in actuality, she was using emotional blackmail to pressure me into selling my house. Matthew then displayed screen grabs of direct messages and comments left by people who had interacted with Emily's posts on social media. Because of the misleading information Emily provided, some of these local residents had developed a bad view of me. These remarks ranged from expressing empathy for her predicament to flatly accusing me of being a callous landlord taking advantage of her circumstances. Along with the social media data, we also included witness statements from my kids, who said that Emily's posts caused them to be bullied at school. They described how classmates harassed and called them after echoing the untrue statements they had heard about their father on social media. My lawyer contended that the bullying my kids experienced was directly related to Emily's unfounded charges on social media. Emily's purposefully false story had a negative impact on my family's welfare, in addition to harming my reputation. This evidence-based presentation clearly illustrated how Emily's social media behavior affected my kids in real life. I continue to believe that justice will be done as the legal process progresses. The truth has been revealed, and the untrue allegations against me have been exposed by the evidence that has been given thus far. In my opinion, the court will recognize the manipulation and provide a just resolution in this matter. Third update. We prevailed. The legal proceedings have made the past month a taxing one. Unexpected turns and twists have made it feel like a roller coaster ride. It became more and more obvious that Emily's allegations were unfounded as my attorney began to provide testimony and supporting documentation. When she introduced a family acquaintance who gave a bogus statement about a pledge I had never made, her attempt to control the event failed. The legitimacy of the witness's assertions is seriously called into question due to the absence of hard proof and discrepancies in their testimony. The court declared the result and decided in my favor after carefully reviewing all of the testimony and supporting documentation. I was quite relieved by this and thankful that the judge saw through all of the unfounded allegations. After being convicted of defamation, Emily was mandated to compensate me for the damage she had done to my reputation. This involved paying the past month's rent as well as any further penalties. Additionally, a restraining order was granted to stop Emily from speaking negatively about my family or me in the future. My conduct and my right to defend my property were upheld by this decision. I saw Emily seated next to her attorney, looking defeated as the court case came to an end. As I looked at her daughter Lily, I couldn't help but think that her mother's conceit had ruined her hopes. Justice has been done, and this nightmare is now over. Everyone learned the value of standing up for themselves and not allowing the bold demands of others to undermine our moral convictions. Now that my home and our means of subsistence are safe, I can proceed with a fresh sense of confidence. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has helped me along the way thus far. My family and I endured tremendous emotional strain and hardship, but in the end, the truth won out. Fourth update. 6 months have passed since my previous update. Emily has been successfully silenced by the restraining order since my court victory, and the damages she was required to pay for defamation offered some measure of comfort for the damage done to my reputation. I served Emily with an eviction notice, and she and her kid were forced to vacate. Even if their situation is still difficult, I realized I was no longer in charge of them. Although I felt a little sorry for her daughter's missed educational prospects, the truth was that Emily's bold request had placed their family in a challenging position. Everyone soon saw the full depth of Emily's lies after the court ordered her to remove her defamatory social media posts. When her daughter Lily unexpectedly contacted me to apologize, that was the last I heard from them. I had watched Lily grow up, and she had always been a wonderful child. But I stopped communicating with them when her mother began making unfounded accusations against me. She wanted to contact me after her mother publicly lost the case. which startled me. She expressed sincere regret in her message for her mother's actions and the resulting difficulties for her family. She acknowledged that her mother's actions had harmed both of our families and thanked us for our understanding and patience during the process. Lily also mentioned that they had moved to a more reasonably priced neighborhood and that she had made the decision to continue her study at a nearby college. She told me she had begged her mother to back off in a conversation she had with her following the conclusion of the judicial proceedings. I'm determined to secure my own future without making any bold demands, Lily said. Because of the bogus claims made by her entitled mother, I felt sorry for her at such a young age. I told her that it was great that she was taking charge of her own life and that everyone deserves a second chance. I told her that the past was behind us and wished her well in her studies. Our lives have adapted to a new normal since Emily and her daughter left my property. The burden of the unfounded allegations and the harassment our kids endured has been removed. We intervened by getting in touch with our kids' school and addressing the bullying they experienced. At last, our family may now proceed in harmony.